Welcome to Life Stories, where we share tales that inspire, heal, and remind us of the beauty in life's twists and turns. Today's story takes us into the lives of Emma and Ryan, two individuals brought together by fate and tested by challenges that pushed them to their limits. It's a journey of resilience, love, and redemption, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope can lead the way to a brighter tomorrow. So, grab a cozy seat and join us as we dive into this moving tale of transformation. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. The late afternoon sun bathed the coastline in a warm golden glow, painting the Pacific waves with streaks of amber and copper. Ryan Carter stood at the edge of his private beach in Malibu, his feet sinking into the soft sand. At 35, Ryan was a man of precision and control, a hallmark of the success that had made his construction empire one of the largest in the country. His daily swim in the ocean was more than a routine, it was a sacred ritual. A way to disconnect from the relentless demands of his life and find peace in the rhythmic embrace of the waves. As he adjusted the straps of his imported goggles, something unusual caught his eye. Just beyond the gentle crest of the waves, a figure flailed against the tide, arms slicing through the air in frantic desperation. A voice, barely audible over the sound of the ocean, cried out for help. Ryan froze for a moment, scanning the beach. A few staff members stood nearby, their expressions frozen with a mixture of confusion and panic. But no one moved. Instinct took over. Ryan sprinted toward the water, diving headlong into the cold embrace of the Atlantic. Each stroke was powerful and deliberate, his body cutting through the water with practiced efficiency. As he drew closer to the struggling figure, details emerged: a young woman, her dark hair plastered to her pale face, eyes wide with fear. She fought the water as if it were an enemy, her movements uncoordinated and increasingly frantic. "Stay calm," Ryan shouted, his voice cutting through her panicked cries. "I'm coming to get you." When he reached her, he wrapped an arm firmly around her waist, steadying her as she gasped for air and clung to him with a desperation that made it hard to swim. Her trembling body pressed against his as he powered toward the shore, his free arm cutting through the waves with precision. By the time they reached the sand, a small crowd had gathered, murmuring with a mixture of concern and relief. Ryan helped her to her feet, noticing how she swayed unsteadily before sinking onto the sand. She was young, no older than her mid-20s, with honey-brown eyes that shone with a mix of fear and gratitude. Even in her disheveled state, there was something striking about her, a magnetic presence that was impossible to ignore. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer now, as he crouched beside her. She nodded, though her voice was shaky when she replied, I think so. Thank you. I don't know how to," her words faltered, and she looked away, visibly uncomfortable under the weight of his gaze. "I didn't mean to be here. I was just walking along the beach. I know it's private. I'm sorry." Her words didn't add up, but Ryan's years in the corporate world had taught him to read between the lines. There was something unsaid, a nuance in her tone that hinted at a deeper story. He decided not to press her. Instead, he nodded toward the resort staff, who rushed forward with towels and water, fussing over her with practiced concern. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma," she said after a long pause. "Emma Williams." "Emma. You're safe now. That's all that matters," he replied, offering her a reassuring smile. "But you should let someone take a look at you, just to be sure." She shook her head firmly, standing with a sudden determination that seemed at odds with her earlier helplessness. "No. I'm fine. Really. I've already taken up too much of your time." Before he could argue, she turned and began to walk away, still wrapped in one of the resort's towels. Ryan watched her go, noticing how steady her steps were, too steady for someone who had just been pulled from the brink of drowning. It wasn't just her movements that unsettled him, it was the entire situation. Her words, her demeanor, even her presence on his private beach, it all felt slightly off. That night, Ryan sat in the expansive living room of his penthouse suite, staring out at the ocean through floor-to-ceiling windows. The memory of Emma's honey-brown eyes lingered in his mind, refusing to be dismissed. It wasn't her beauty that held his attention, though it was undeniable. It was the nagging sense that something wasn't as it seemed. Years of managing high-stakes projects had honed his intuition, and it rarely failed him. As he replayed the events of the afternoon, a suspicion began to form. Was Emma's appearance on the beach truly an accident? Or had he stumbled into something far more complex than a simple rescue? The rhythmic crash of the waves outside seemed to echo his restless thoughts. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the faint hum of a ship's horn, a reminder of the vastness of the world beyond his carefully curated life. Ryan didn't yet know that his chance encounter with Emma Williams was only the beginning of a story that would challenge everything he believed about himself, about love, and about what it truly meant to see someone. As he finally turned away from the window and prepared to head to bed, a single thought lingered in his mind: fate, it seemed, had other plans for him. The following days in Malibu were a whirlwind of routine and distraction. But Ryan couldn't shake the image of Emma Williams from his mind. Something about her, the way she'd appeared out of nowhere, her reluctance to accept help, and her steady walk away from what should have been a traumatizing ordeal, didn't sit right with him. The logical part of him told him to let it go. People wandered into private beaches all the time, and not every strange occurrence needed a deeper meaning. Yet, a gut feeling, a nagging pull he couldn't ignore, kept him thinking about her. Back at his company headquarters in Los Angeles, Ryan tried to focus on his projects. Meetings stretched on, filled with spreadsheets, blueprints, and proposals. He was good at his job, a natural leader, but for the first time, he found himself distracted. His assistant, Claire, noticed. "Ryan," she said, placing a stack of documents on his desk, "you've been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. Are you okay?" He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his dark hair. "Just a lot on my mind, Claire. Nothing to worry about." Her knowing look suggested she didn't believe him. "Well, if you ever need to talk, you know where to find me." That night, Ryan found himself walking along the same stretch of beach where he'd rescued Emma. The tide was lower, revealing jagged rocks and tide pools that glistened in the moonlight. The ocean breeze carried the faint scent of salt and seaweed, mingling with the distant hum of waves crashing against the shore. It was peaceful, yet his thoughts were anything but. He replayed the details of their encounter. Her eyes, the way they flickered with unspoken fear and gratitude. Her insistence on leaving quickly. And then, that strange feeling he'd had when she walked away, like he was missing a piece of a puzzle he hadn't realized he was assembling. "Why does this matter so much?" he muttered to himself, kicking at the sand. The answer came unexpectedly the next morning when his assistant handed him a thick manila envelope. "This came in for you. No return address." Ryan frowned, pulling open the envelope. Inside was a series of black and white photos. The first few were ordinary shots of him walking to and from his office, entering meetings, or attending charity events. Then, the next photo stopped him cold. It was of him and Emma on the beach, just after he had pulled her from the water. Her figure was draped in the resort towel, her face turned toward him in what looked like a private conversation. The accompanying note was short but ominous. "Do you always save strangers? Or do you just like a challenge?" Ryan stared at the note, his jaw tightening. Someone had been watching them, documenting the event. But who? And why? A wave of anger surged through him. He didn't like being manipulated, and this felt like the start of a game he hadn't agreed to play. "Claire," he called, his voice sharper than intended. She appeared at the door almost instantly. "Get me every security feed from the beach over the last week. And find out if anyone saw something unusual the day I saved that woman." Claire hesitated, sensing his mood. "Of course. Anything else?" "Yes," Ryan said, holding up the note. Run a check on the name Emma Williams. I want to know everything. Over the next few days, Claire delivered her findings. Though they only deepened the mystery, no one by the name of Emma Williams was registered at the resort. Nor was there any indication she had even passed through the area. The security feeds showed her walking along the beach just before the incident but offered no clues about where she had come from or where she went afterward. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Ryan's suspicion turned into determination. He wasn't the kind of man to let mysteries go unsolved. Especially not when they involved his own private sanctuary. But what started as curiosity began to evolve into something else, a strange sense of connection to the enigmatic woman who had disrupted his carefully ordered world. It wasn't just her disappearance or the cryptic photographs. It was the feeling he couldn't shake. The sense that their encounter hadn't been random. Fate, it seemed, was weaving a thread between them. And whether he wanted to or not, Ryan knew he had to follow it. A week passed. And Ryan's frustration grew. His efforts to uncover the truth about Emma had hit a wall, leaving him with more questions than answers. Despite his best attempts to move on, her image lingered in his thoughts, those honey-colored eyes, the tremor in her voice when she thanked him, and the way she'd walked away without looking back. Then, one evening, fate intervened. Ryan attended a charity gala in Beverly Hills, hosted by one of his company's key partners. The event was a grand affair, with glittering chandeliers, tables adorned with elaborate floral arrangements, and guests dressed in designer attire. Ryan navigated the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging polite smiles and handshakes. Yet, his mind was elsewhere. As the evening wore on, he stepped onto the balcony for a moment of solitude. The cool night air was a welcome contrast to the stuffy room inside. He leaned against the railing, gazing at the twinkling city lights below. "Ryan Carter," a voice said from behind him. He turned, startled. Standing there, illuminated by the glow of the city, was Emma Williams. She was dressed elegantly in a deep green gown that highlighted her striking features. Her hair was styled simply, and her makeup was subtle. But there was no mistaking the quiet confidence she carried. "Emma," he said, his voice betraying his surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." Her lips curled into a faint smile. "I didn't expect to see you either." Ryan stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "You vanished after that day on the beach. I've been trying to figure out who you are." She hesitated, her expression guarded. "Why does it matter?" "Because," Ryan said, his voice firm but not unkind, "there's something you're not telling me, and I don't like being left in the dark." Emma looked away, gripping the railing. "Maybe it's better that way." "Better for who?" Ryan asked, his tone softening. "Emma, if you're in trouble, I can help." She laughed lightly, though there was no humor in it. "You're a fixer, aren't you? Always looking for a problem to solve." Ryan didn't deny it. "It's who I am. But this isn't about fixing things. It's about understanding. When I pulled you out of that water, I felt something like I was meant to be there, to help you. And I think you felt it too." Emma's eyes glistened as she turned back to him. For a moment, the mask she wore slipped, and Ryan saw the vulnerability she worked so hard to hide. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." "Then tell me," he urged. "Let me decide." She exhaled slowly, her resolve faltering. "I wasn't supposed to be on that beach. I wasn't supposed to meet you. But things don't always go as planned." Ryan's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, a sharp voice interrupted them. "Emma, there you are." A man in his 40s approached, his tailored suit and confident demeanor screaming wealth and power. He placed a possessive hand on Emma's arm, his smile polite but cold. "You've been hard to find." Emma stiffened, her expression instantly guarded. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, her tone formal. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Clearly," he replied, his eyes briefly flicking to Ryan before settling back on Emma. "We should talk." Ryan stepped forward. "Who are you?" The man's smile didn't waver. "I'm someone who looks after Emma's best interests." "And you are?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "Ryan Carter. And I don't appreciate people speaking for others." "Then perhaps you should let Emma decide who she wants to speak with." Whittaker countered smoothly, his grip on her arm tightening slightly. Emma met Ryan's gaze, a silent plea in her eyes. "It's okay," she said softly. "I need to go." Ryan watched helplessly as Whittaker led her away, his mind racing. Whoever this man was, he held power over Emma, power that made her retreat into herself. As they disappeared into the crowd, Ryan made a silent vow. This wasn't the end. He would uncover the truth, no matter what it took. Ryan couldn't shake the encounter at the gala. Whittaker's domineering presence and Emma's barely concealed fear gnawed at him, confirming that there was far more to her story than she let on. That night, he made a decision: he would dig deeper, no matter how long it took. The next morning, Ryan reached out to his most trusted confidant, Alex Harper, a private investigator who had worked with him on several delicate business matters. Alex was sharp, discreet, and relentless, the perfect person for the job. "Find out everything you can about Emma Williams," Ryan instructed during their meeting at a quiet cafe in downtown Los Angeles. "She was at the gala last night. And there's a man named Whittaker involved. I need to know who he is and what his connection to her might be." Alex nodded, scribbling notes in his leather-bound notebook. "Give me a few days. I'll see what I can uncover." True to his word, Alex returned within the week, armed with information that left Ryan both stunned and more determined than ever. "She's been through a lot," Alex began, sliding a folder across the table. "Her full name is Emma Catherine Williams. She's originally from a small town in Montana. Her parents passed away when she was young, and she bounced around in the foster system until she aged out." Ryan's heart sank. He could already sense the layers of pain Emma had likely endured. But Alex wasn't finished. "She moved to California about 6 years ago, working odd jobs to support herself. Then, 3 years ago, she became involved with Matthew Whittaker." Ryan's jaw tightened at the mention of the man from the gala. "Who is he?" "A wealthy businessman," Alex explained. "Owns a string of high-end resorts and nightclubs. He's known for being charming in public. But there are stories about how he uses his money and influence to control people, especially women. He's had several allegations against him, but nothing has ever stuck." "And Emma?" Ryan asked, his voice low. Alex sighed. "From what I've gathered, she got tangled up with him when she was struggling to make ends meet. At first, it seemed like he was helping her, offering her a job, paying off debts, but it quickly became clear that his help came with strings attached. He's been controlling her ever since." The revelation hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. He pictured Emma's haunted expression, the way she had tensed under Whittaker's touch, and the fear in her voice when she told Ryan he didn't know what he was getting into. She was trapped. "Does she owe him money?" Ryan asked, his mind already racing with possible solutions. "It's more complicated than that," Alex said. "Whittaker's power comes from manipulation and leverage. He knows how to make people feel like they have no way out." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his thoughts a whirlwind. He had built his career by solving problems, by refusing to take no for an answer. And now, he couldn't stand the thought of Emma being controlled by someone like Whittaker. "She deserves a way out," Ryan said firmly. "Can we give her one?" Alex hesitated. "It's risky, Ryan. Whittaker's not the kind of guy who backs down easily." "I don't care how risky it is," Ryan replied, his voice steely. "She needs help, and I'm going to make sure she gets it." The plan began to take shape over the next few days. Ryan and Alex worked together to find a way to untangle Emma from Whittaker's grip. They compiled evidence, identified potential allies, and strategized about how to protect Emma once they confronted the situation. But Ryan knew the most critical part of the plan would be convincing Emma to trust him. He couldn't force her to leave Whittaker, she had to choose that for herself. All he could do was show her that there was a life beyond the one she was trapped in. And he would do everything in his power to make her believe it. The sun hung low over Los Angeles as Ryan prepared to meet Emma. The plan was delicate. And he knew it hinged on her willingness to trust him. He had asked her to meet him at a quiet cafe away from the city's prying eyes. Ryan arrived early, choosing a corner table that provided privacy and a clear view of the entrance. His heart raced as he waited, the weight of what was at stake pressing heavily on him. When Emma finally walked in, she looked both hesitant and weary. Her dark hair framed her face, and her eyes carried the shadows of someone who had endured far more than she should have. She spotted Ryan, hesitated, then made her way to his table. He stood, pulling out a chair for her. "Thank you for coming," he said gently as she sat down. Emma offered a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You said it was important." "It is," Ryan replied, his tone serious but soft. He waited until the server had brought their drinks before continuing. "Emma, I know you've been through a lot. And I know about Whittaker." Her hand froze mid-reach for her coffee, and her eyes darted up to meet his. For a moment, her mask slipped, revealing fear and something else, resignation. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Emma." Ryan leaned forward, his gaze steady and compassionate. "You don't have to pretend with me. I know what he's done. I know how he's been controlling you." Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly looked away, blinking them back. "You don't understand," she whispered. "It's not that simple." "I know it feels that way," Ryan said. "But I want to help you. You don't have to face this alone." She shook her head, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "You don't get it. He's powerful. He knows everything about me, everything I've done. If I leave, he'll ruin me." Ryan reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "He wants you to believe that, Emma. That's how he keeps control. But it's not true. You're stronger than you think. And you're not alone in this." Her lips trembled, and a single tear slid down her cheek. "Why do you even care? You barely know me." Ryan's expression softened. "Because I see you, Emma. I see the strength you've had to survive. The kindness you still have despite everything. And I see a future for you, a life that's yours. Not one dictated by someone like Whittaker." Emma closed her eyes, the tears now flowing freely. She wanted to believe him, but the fear was overwhelming. "What if he comes after me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ryan's grip on her hand tightened, his voice firm. "Then he'll have to deal with me. I've faced men like him before, Emma. And I'm not afraid of him. I will protect you." She opened her eyes, searching his face for any hint of doubt. But there was none. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope, a tiny crack in the walls she had built around herself. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice shaky but resolute. Ryan smiled, relief washing over him. "You don't have to do it alone. We'll take this one step at a time. I've already spoken to people who can help. They'll make sure you're safe and that Whittaker can't touch you." Emma nodded slowly, her fear still present but no longer paralyzing. She didn't know if she could fully trust Ryan, but she was willing to take the first step. For the first time in years, the chains that had bound her seemed to loosen, and she allowed herself to dream of a life beyond Whittaker's grasp. As they left the cafe together, Ryan felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about helping Emma, it was about standing up against the kind of injustice he had always despised. And as the evening air wrapped around them, he silently vowed that he wouldn't stop until Emma was free. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity and tension. Ryan moved swiftly, contacting trusted allies who specialized in legal protection and personal security. He knew they had to act quickly. Whittaker was not the kind of man to take a challenge lightly. Meanwhile, Emma stayed at a safe house Ryan had arranged. a modest but comfortable apartment in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. For Emma, it was strange to feel the first flickers of safety. The space, while unfamiliar, offered her something she hadn't experienced in years: silence. Untainted by fear, she could sit by the window, sipping tea and watching the world go by without the constant worry of Whittaker's shadow looming over her. Yet, even in these quiet moments, the scars of her past lingered. She struggled to believe that she deserved this reprieve or that it would last. Ryan visited her daily, bringing updates and reassurance. On one such visit, he arrived with a stack of documents and a determined expression. Emma greeted him at the door, her face a mixture of exhaustion and hope. "Good news," Ryan said as he stepped inside. "The legal team is confident they can build a strong case against Whittaker. We have evidence of his financial misconduct, and a few people have come forward with testimonies." Emma's brow furrowed as she sat across from him at the small kitchen table. "You're risking so much, Ryan. Your company, your reputation, why are you doing this?" Ryan met her gaze, his tone unwavering. "Because it's the right thing to do. Whittaker has hurt too many people, and someone needs to stand up to him. Besides," he added with a faint smile, "you deserve a chance at a real life, Emma. And I want to see you have that." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe him. But the weight of her past pressed heavily on her. "What if it's not enough?" she whispered. "What if he finds a way to win, like he always does?" Ryan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Then we'll fight again. And again. If we have to. You're not alone in this anymore, Emma. I promise." His words stirred something deep within her, a fragile but growing sense of resilience. For so long, she had seen herself as weak, as someone who needed saving. But now, with Ryan's unwavering support, she began to wonder if she could find the strength to reclaim her life. Later that evening, as Ryan left the apartment, he paused in the hallway, a shadow of doubt crossing his face. He had spent years building his company, forging alliances, and securing his position in the industry. Challenging a man as powerful as Whittaker was a gamble, one that could cost him everything. But as he thought of Emma, her quiet bravery and the flicker of hope in her eyes, he knew he couldn't back down. Whittaker, however, was not one to sit idle. Ryan's actions hadn't gone unnoticed, and the older man was already laying the groundwork for a counterattack. His network of influence reached deep into the legal system, the media, and even Ryan's business. Whittaker's threats were subtle at first: veiled comments in the press, whispered rumors about Ryan's capabilities as a leader. But Ryan had expected this. He had prepared for it. One night, Emma found herself unable to sleep. She sat by the window, staring out at the city lights and the life she had left behind. Her thoughts drifted to Ryan, the way he had stepped into her world like a force of nature, refusing to let her sink further into despair. She admired his strength, his unshakable resolve. But she also feared for him. What if helping her destroyed him? The next morning, Emma decided she couldn't remain a passive participant in her own rescue. When Ryan arrived, she met him with a new determination in her eyes. "I want to help," she said firmly. Ryan tilted his head, intrigued. "Help how?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I can't just sit here and wait for you to fix everything. This is my fight too." Ryan smiled, a mix of pride and admiration lighting up his face. "I was hoping you'd say that. Together. Then, together," she agreed, her voice steady. For the first time in years, Emma felt the stirrings of agency, of control over her life. She didn't know what the future held, but with Ryan by her side, she was ready to face it. The fight against Whittaker was only beginning, but she no longer faced it as a victim. She was learning to become something far stronger. As the dust settled on the tumultuous battle against Whittaker, Emma and Ryan found themselves standing on the threshold of a new beginning. Their fight had not been easy. but it had brought justice and, more importantly, healing. Emma, once haunted by fear and doubt, now embraced life with a newfound strength and purpose, while Ryan rediscovered the power of integrity and love. Together, they built a future not defined by the past but by the hope and resilience they shared. Their story became a testament to the strength of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, redemption and love can shine through. And so, their journey continues, one filled with endless possibilities and lessons yet to be learned. Thank you for joining us in this story. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring tales of hope, love, and transformation. See you in the next one.